Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the new episode of Ambassador's Lounge. Today we have chosen the topic on Chinese President Xi Jinping's visit to Moscow, and it has the relevance to the peace in Ukraine war. And the most important aspect of his visit was that it was a sequel to China's 12-point proposal about bringing peace and ensuring sovereignty of the states. It may be, you can say, recall of the UN Charter principles, but at the same time, when you reinterpret it and when you imply it, it means that Russia has to vacate the areas it has occupied. And today's panel, I have my colleagues, Ambassador Imran Yawar and Ambassador Amjad Moman. And both have, in fact, had a deep discussion also on the subject. So I begin with Ambassador Imran Yawar. Imran,
thank you.
How you summarize President Xi Jinping's visit?
Asif, that was had to do more with the optics. There are two aspects of this visit. One is the bilateral relations. I think on bilateral relations, things went fine. The two sides agreed to enhance trade. They agreed to enhance cooperation in science and technology. More important, they agreed to enhance cooperation in energy. China is already importing a lot of oil from Russia, and now they are talking about activating the Siberia 2 pipeline, which will go through Mongolia for the gas.
It means they will, in fact, replace the European loss with China.
That's what the intention is, and of course, China is getting cheap energy, so it is benefiting actually from what is happening there. The second aspect was China was looking forward to play an active role in mediating between Ukraine and Russia. I think that has not happened, despite the fact that China came up with a 12-point plan, which you yourself said it's more of a replication of the UN Charter. There were no specific things about what the two sides could do to bring about peace in the region. And of course, it was because of this reason that the West and the Americans, they did not accept that plan. And even Ukraine was not very enthusiastic about this thing. So I think China has not been able to play the role of mediation, and that thing is not there. In Middle East, China was able to facilitate the talks between Iran and Saudi Arabia, because both the sides were inclined towards that. Both the sides wanted peace. But here, Ukraine has preconditions, and Russia is also not really ready, despite the fact that Russians have said that President Xi's plan could be a base for peace in Ukraine. But still, the two countries are not ready for that.
Thank you, Imran. And Amjad, my question to you would be that President Xi Jinping, based on his 12-point program, in fact, it was intended to end the war between Russia and Ukraine. There were mixed reactions to that. Even President Zelensky did not outrightly reject it. I think he is waiting that China may engage him. So far, there has been contacts between the two countries at the ministerial level. You think that this visit to Moscow, Xi's visit to Moscow, would help break the ice between Moscow and Kiev?
Thank you, Ambassador Durrani, for taking me. The thing is that the world is now, we are witnessing a new world in two camps. On one side is Russia, China, and with its allies, and the other side is Europe and the United States of America. And this visit is taking place against the backdrops of China's recent détente between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and the ICC judgment against arrest warrant of President Putin. So it is more important for China to engage itself in a situation and to prove itself as a global mediator and broker in difficult situation now which is taking place in Ukraine war between Russia and the West. So the thing is that it has definitely given a boost to President Xi Jinping image as a global leader at the global level, but at the same time it is also giving chances that why not to try the peace to be brokered between the two, Russia and Ukraine.
Imran, you think that China's efforts to mediate or facilitate a peace between Ukraine and Russia would gain traction in future?
As if when President Xi was departing Moscow, final words with President Putin, he said that there's a change coming that hasn't happened in 100 years. When we are together, we are driving the change.
What does it mean?
It means that these two countries, they're getting together and they are going for a new world order, which is opposed to what the Americans and the Western-led world order is.
What do you think that how the West and Americans
they
are
have-
going to react to that?
Of
to
course,
this statement?
of course, they're not going to be happy about. You see, Americans have tried to isolate Iran, they failed. They tried to isolate Russia, they failed. So Russia is, because of China and of course its relations with Russia and the Middle East, Russia is no longer isolated.
And to complement what you have just said, Russia has also now, in fact, announced that henceforth their oil proceeds can be dealt in yuan.
In yuan. They are yuanizing
Yuanization of the
Yes.
Russian economy.
yes.
And de-dollarization of the
But
Russian
then,
economy.
Asif, there's one thing. If this thing happens, then it means Russia would be dependent on Chinese system, Chinese
Why
state
we
bank.
say dependent? The question is...
You are dependent. I mean,
No,
as
the
a dollars, you are dependent
No,
on Americans.
But China has got a, now it's number 2 economy in GDP terms. But in, purchasing power parity, they have, surpassed the Americans. For them, Russia is one of the vendors. The others are in the Gulf states, which is why that they could, broker the deal
Yes.
between Russia and between Saudi
Iran,
Arabia
Saudi, yeah.
and Saudi Arabia. So here, this also in fact shows that China is gaining the status and strength to in fact influence the world politics.
It was already there, Asif. It was
No,
already
in a
there.
sense, the reason
But
is
what coming to
in the
your
context of Xi's visit to Moscow, that we have to interpret that.
But
What do you say?
I don't think at this moment there are any indications that China would be able to sort of mediate or bring about a rapprochement between Russia and Ukraine. Both the sides have, and they are standing on their positions. There is no shifting on this position. Russia's Ukrainians say that, well, unless and until Russians withdraw from the Ukrainian territory, there is no option and there is no chance of peace talks. And
But look, this would be a precondition.
yeah.
The question is, you talk when, this is a crisis. So here you have to hold negotiations. And you think that Xi's efforts to mediate between Russia and Ukraine will succeed?
Well, it depends. President Xi is to go back, and there are talks that he may call President Zelensky, a telephone call. the Ukrainians say they have been waiting for a telephone call from the Chinese. That has not come as yet. If that thing happens, yes, there could be some movement. You see, once they start talking, Chinese start talking to the Ukrainians, Chinese start talking to the Russians. Things, I mean, with negotiations, things can move forward.
Amjad, your take on that.
We have yet to see after this visit just concluded that what is going to be the response in the international media, especially from the US and Ukraine side, about the discussion which was held between the two leaders in Moscow. But I hope that the Ukraine will respond positively to a peace process that of the 12-point proposal which President Xi has submitted, and that is also based on the sovereignty and settlement of the issue.
Amjad, you are right. But here, when you read the American reaction, so Secretary of State Blinken, since he is heading the State Department, so he has couched his sentiments and statement in a diplomatic language, and he says that there are certain elements in 12-point formula by the Chinese we can in fact negotiate. But when it comes to National Security Advisor Sullivan's statement, he called it almost in so many words that it's a drama. So here I think Americans would also be looking at Xi's efforts to moderate or to facilitate a talk between Moscow and Ukraine. So in that light, do you think that it is going to succeed?
Even Anthony Blinken has described this visit, Xi Jinping visit to Moscow, as a diplomatic cover to President Putin against the backdrop of the ICC judgment. But anyway, there is no harm in making efforts to bring the two countries, especially Ukraine and Russia, on a negotiation table. So let's hope. We should be optimistic, not pessimistic about the efforts of the two sides.
Thank you.
If I may,
Imran, if you may.
There is a reason to be optimist. Here, there is no reason to be optimist. You see, what is happening is that simultaneously, I mean, as the visit of President Xi was taking place to China, unannounced visit of Japanese Prime Minister to Kiev takes place. That was the visit was not announced. It was not scheduled. He just goes to Poland. From there, he takes the train and goes to Kiev. Now, what is happening is that Americans, the West, they are in fact telling the Chinese and the Russians that we are behind. They are reinforcing this impression and this thing that we are behind the Ukrainians. Even if Chinese president goes there and expresses solidarity with the Russians, we are there.
Correct.
And one thing. Second thing is the Americans, the West, they are providing weapons in billions of dollars.
Correct.
How would the defense industry of America and Europe allow that thing? And as if recently, England has now UK has announced that they are going to provide weapons, the ammunition for the Leopard tanks, which they are giving to, which is uranium depleted. Now, that is according to international.
That's banned.
That's banned.
Yes. No, here I want to pick up your brains when we talk about diplomacy. So far, there has been no diplomacy played as far as Ukrainian crisis is concerned.
The West is not allowing it.
They are not. The issue is President Xi has initiated this with his 12-point plan. How you see the future of these efforts which Xi has taken for bringing peace between Russia and Ukraine?
See, China has taken this step. They have presented the 12 points for what they say is to bring about peace in the peace between Ukraine and Russia. Now, West has rejected that. Kiev has accepted that with certain, not really energetically or not very with enthusiasm. Now, Asif, unless and until there is ready, Americans, the West, they are the main providers. They are giving, IMF has just approved what, 15 billion dollars loan to Ukraine. So when these
And
things,
here we are begging for $1 billion.
1 billion. So when these things are happening, how do you think that the Chinese efforts will bear fruit? One thing. Second thing, do you think the West and the Americans would let Chinese to emerge or China to emerge as a real power broker, as a real mediator on the world stage? I don't think so, sir.
So, in fact, you have explained everything. Amjad,
The
what do you
thing
think?
is that I am optimistic because it is the kind of a player who is going to blink first. Both Russia and Ukraine will one day come to the negotiations table and will resolve their issues, despite the fact that United States of America and Europe, they don't want this kind of arrangement or agreement. But Ukraine is suffering. The people of Ukraine are suffering.
Correct.
So that is the issue. That
Not only Ukraine.
The world.
Allow me to say that
Yeah,
the
even
world,
the whole world is
100 plus
suffering.
countries have been affected.
Exactly.
And affected negatively as far as energy prices are concerned or food prices are concerned.
Exactly. And also now you can see that so many banks have collapsed. In Switzerland, 2 banks have collapsed.
Well,
in the-
they may that may not be
But that
because
is
of the
a-
Ukrainian crisis.
yeah.
They have their own.
Let me
reasons.
ask you a question, Asif.
Yes.
How do you think, or how is it the war, do you think the war is impacting Russia China relations in any way?
I think there's a tacit understanding between Russia and China. If you can recall, before Russia's invasion of Ukraine, President Xi had a meeting with Putin and they
In the
said that-
Chinese the Beijing Olympics.
Yes. So in that context, he lent full support to Moscow's contention. But subsequently, China has also realized that its relations with Russia may serve a limited purpose because they have a trade with Europe, they have a trade with the United States, and they are the largest trading partners actually.
Almost $15 billion together, US and
No.
EU together.
No. It is close to $700 billion
Okay.
between US and the
Oh, yes,
EU.
you're right. You're right.
So their trade is more than
Yes.
$2 trillion.
Yes, you're right. You're right. You're right.
So
yes.
here we are talking about because they have to maintain the balance. Here the problem for the Americans is that they cannot swallow that China would be able to mediate things. This used to be the right of the
Americans, yes.
But now things are changing. So here we have to look at it from that perspective.
But
because
Asif-
recently we had a pleasant surprise as far as Saudi Arabia
Iran.
and Iran is concerned.
Russia is, I mean, the war with Ukraine, it's prolonging. Russia is bogged down.
This
And
has
how
actually
can, don't you think it will affect Chinese position on this war?
Imran, these are difficult questions and answers won't be satisfactory. I cannot satisfy you with the answers. Reason is that Russia's credibility is also at stake.
It's dented. It's dented. Its position
stake.
as a military power has
There's
been
no
dented.
doubt. There is no doubt. But at the same time, it is a difficult test for the Chinese to stand by the Russians.
But then, do you think, Amjad, that China can afford to lose Putin as a pro-Chinese president?
They can't.
They can't.
But at the same time, when you look at overall, the map of the world, so important developing countries actually, when they demonstrated their neutrality at the UN General Assembly voting, So that gives them strength also, because if then you go by the number game, then yes, Americans have won. But when you go with the qualitative and quantitative analysis of the whole gamut, then Americans have not succeeded, and that's the frustration, including their frustration with their newly found love with India, that they also abstain. So here we are looking at issues which are actually not just a Russia-Ukraine crisis. It is also the future paradigm which is emerging,
The new world order.
the new world order which is emerging,
Yeah.
and in which United States fears that it may lose.
Hegemony will go away.
It may lose.
Yeah.
Final words, gentlemen. Amjad, how you see the scenario emerging?
Well, there is no sign of ending the situation in Ukraine. The war is not coming to an end. The other point is that whether it is affordable for Russia to see its defeat at the hands of Ukrainian through the military assistance of United States and Europe, and whether it is also
They have already spent more than $100 billion
Yes.
dollars.
And
Yes.
it is whether it is also affordable for China to see the defeat of Russia. My point is that no, it cannot take place because Russia's security itself is at stake, and once it happens, then I think the next target is China. So it is better for the two countries, warring countries, Ukraine and Russia, to sit together and resolve the issue with the mediation of Americans and the Chinese.
Very good point, Amjad. Imran, your take.
I say, as the future scenario, as Amjad said, the end to war is not in sight at the moment. There would be a fatigue in the Europe, the US, as far as this war is concerned, and I think that fatigue is emerging. Germans are already, and the French as well, they want peace talks. So you can see this, you can see that both these countries, important European countries, they want peace process to be started. Similarly, in Ukraine, you would see that, I mean, the way they are using the ammunition, the way they are using I mean, this aid is not going to continue for indefinite period. Even the Americans are going to get exhausted, and the American public is going to ask the government that where is this money is going. So I think that ultimately both the countries, but Ukraine will have to enter into talks with Russia, but Russia being defeated, I don't think that is an option which the Russians are going to accept, or even which the Chinese would want. Chinese would not want Russia to be defeated.
Am I correct in my reading of the situation which you two gentlemen have just expressed, that ultimately we have to give diplomacy a chance?
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
And sooner the better, because precious human rights,
Human lives are at stake. Yeah,
being
absolutely
wasted,
correct. Absolutely correct.
and then resources are being wasted, and the whole world is in turmoil.
Absolutely.
And this is what we have to, in fact, look at it and then formulate our responses. Last word, finally. What is the lesson for Pakistan, or what should we be doing
Doing it regarding what?
regarding this whole scenario which is emerging?
We have to be neutral if we can afford to be neutral, which is a
So we have been neutral.
Which is, yes, we have been. Well, there are a lot of rumors going around about us, whether we are really neutral or not. Whether we can be neutral or not, actually neutral or not, I don't know. Pakistan is not in a state where we can afford such a luxury.
But, here we in fact abstained on the vote, which must have annoyed the Americans. And but at the same time, our explanation of vote, EOV, which we call, was also calling upon Russia and Ukraine to give diplomacy a chance. So, Amjad, what about giving diplomacy a chance?
Exactly, that should be the wise course of action for the two countries, and let the whole world should get itself engaged into resolving the issue between the two countries. The Ukrainian sovereignty should be guaranteed. At the same time, the sensitivity, Russian sensitivity, should also be addressed.
Correct. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, this was our program today about the Ukrainian crisis, and especially in light of President Xi's visit to Moscow. How it unfolds in future, we have to watch carefully. But at the same time, I think the lesson and our panelists, their advice was, give the diplomacy a chance. So keep watching Ambassador's Lounge. Thank you so much.